Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Manns, and I'd like to welcome you to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is the November 28th, 2022 edition of the show, and it has been 430 weeks since the closing of the North Adams Regional Hospital. The April 4th Coalition's mission statement is, we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights and are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but as is our custom, we put the emphasis on Article 23, and just to add a little spice to life, I have number 1 and 2, and Dick has 3 and 4.
Give it a try.
So here we go. Number 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself or herself and his or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests.
Okay, and as our custom, we give a thank you and a shout out to Michael Putnam's WNLP 107.1 radio station as he airs the audio portion of our show at 6 p.m. on Friday. And to David Fabiano, who is our producer of the show, for all his patience with us as we stumble through everything each week. And Dick, how was your Thanksgiving?
Very good, very good.
You had
How about
family?
yours? Yes, we had it at our house. We had 11, 3 grandchildren, my children, and
Very
a
good.
couple spouses. And
Yep. Yeah, it was. I had just 2 guests at my house, but
Yeah.
we did the full meal anyway because they had nowhere else to go for
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, so we had 2 guests over.
Wonderful. I
And it was
delivered
fun.
meals for the meals program down at the high rise. I delivered a dozen meals for the. There were
Cool.
over 200 meals delivered to families in North Adams,
Adams.
through St. John's. Well, through
St. John's or the
no, it's
First Congregational?
it's the Episcopal Church.
The
It's
Episcopal.
All Saints
All
Episcopal
Saints.
Church, but I think it was a community-wide effort,
Oh.
a little bit bigger than usually the monthly program. But
Right.
there were a lot of volunteers, and
That was great. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who were in need.
my granddaughter helped me because my wife was working, so she came with me and helped me distribute the meals.
I'll bet she was a hit
Yeah, she was.
because they usually love children.
Yeah, well, she's 12 years old, so she's a young adult almost.
Almost young adult.
Yeah.
Preteen. Preteen. Almost teen. All right. And in the Berkshire Eagle, I presume?
Yes.
They're
was
on
last weekend's.
last weekend, November 19th, 20th.
Yeah.
Dick noticed something because we both have been active in unions, and he wanted to share it with the audience, which was that the Berkshire Visiting Nurse Association is seeking its first union contract. And Tamarin Cloudis and Sean Mattoon wrote this letter. And it goes, we are writing on behalf of a group of dedicated and hardworking healthcare professionals who work at the Berkshire Visiting Nurse Association. 38 of us, 75%, have agreed to support this letter, and the 2 of us are proud to represent our colleagues. The jobs we do ensure that members of our community are cared for in their very own home. It is important work and feels more like a calling than a job. Currently, we are in negotiations to secure our first union contract. It's important that we get a contract that makes the BVNA a place that other committed healthcare professionals would want to work. We care so much about the service we provide, and we want the BVNA to thrive. We want to provide a quality services and ensure quality jobs by way of a strong collective bargaining agreement. Please look us up if you are a healthcare professional in search of a job. You'd be hard-pressed to find a better group than us. So apparently they were not unionized prior
Yeah,
to this. And when you think about it, these are the people who come when you're home for hospice or you're home recuperating from a major ailment to help you rehab from there rather than going somewhere else.
So yeah, they're advocating for people who are in their homes, and want to sort of switch gears and talk to We're going to show a clip of Jon Stewart's podcast. He interviews Representative Katie Porter from California, who I think is probably one of the best Congress people that we have. And I just want you to see it. And she advocates for the middle class and the working class. And she did win. She narrowly won victory. So let's hear from Jon Stewart and Katie Porter.
All right. This is excitement for today. We are going to bring in Congresswoman Katie Porter from California. Well, first of all, Congresswoman, welcome.
Thank you.
Tuesday is election day in your district. How are things out there for you? What's the situation?
This race is a dead heat. It's going to be a toss-up, and I think that people are sometimes surprised to hear that. But
I am surprised to hear
we
that.
have seen this happening around the country. Some of these suburban districts in bluer states, so places in Washington, in Oregon, in New Jersey, in California. These are really going to be battlegrounds. So my race was just moved to a toss-up, which is not the news you want to wake up to 1 week before Election Day. But I was also out this morning, putting up flyers and getting ready to canvass and knock doors. So I am going to work my butt off to make sure that we win in a week from now.
Here's why I find that incredibly surprising. You are and have been one of the most effective communicators and legislators for economic issues that I have seen in the last 20 years in Congress. The clarity in which you are able to illustrate the different points of our economy and how it's skewed and corrupt, I'm always really impressed by. So let me ask you a question. Do your voters have C-SPAN?
So
Do they get that?
actually, this is a great point. There's 2 points I want to make here. One is at the sort of a simple point. $9 million in Republican super PAC ads that have been answered by $300,000 of Democratic mailers. That's a big gulf. That's $8.7 million in negative messaging.
So this is the National Committee and Republicans and other SPACs and PACs.
Right. So the National Republican Committees have spent $9 million, and the Democrats have answered that with $300,000. So that's going to have an effect any which way you cut it, straight up. The second point I want to make is...
Could the Democratic Committee get you that money?
Sure they could.
Can
Sure they could.
Can they start
Sure
spending?
they could. But they're making decisions all over the map. They're prioritizing different people and different races, and there's a complex map to do that. So look, I always want to make sure that I can do my part to help elect Democrats everywhere, that there are good Democrats on the ballot. And so I'm working to stand on my own 2 feet here and deliver this race myself with the help, by the way, of all of my grassroots supporters and people who knock doors for me and chip in. But the second point I want to make, which I think is a really interesting one, is you said, do your viewers have C-SPAN? And the answer, of course, is sure. But they're not sitting at home all day watching it because they have jobs and kids and parents and commutes.
Right.
So one of the things that I think people don't know about politics that I really struggle with is we are not allowed ethically under the House ethics rules to use footage of us doing our jobs in our campaigns. So I can't show viewers.
Wait, what?
Yes. So if I question a witness about inflation, if I push the CDC director and get us free testing, if I hold Jamie Dimon's feet to the fire about employee pay, just to name a few, I can't use those clips, that footage of me actually doing my job well to get elected. And of course, the only reason people should vote for anyone, Democrat, Republican, or otherwise, is if they think they're going to do a good job. But I'm not allowed to show people me actually doing a good job. Instead, the commercials have to be filled with, footage of me walking through a happy meadow or whatever. So that is one of the real burdens we face is...
Congressman, let me just see if I can get a handle on this. You're not allowed to show footage of yourself doing a job, but representatives in the House and senators are allowed to use insider information to trade stocks.
Right. So that's why the House...
That is allowed.
The House Committee on Ethics is not a committee on morality. Let's just be clear. ethics in this sense are a set of rules that someone put together, often solving one problem at a time, not in a holistic, complete way, not updated to deal with kind of modern realities. So, my
Yes.
frustration is I want to earn people's votes because they think I'm fighting for them and they think I'm delivering for them. But I'm not allowed to show them that.
But what would be the reasoning behind that? Has anybody ever asked what that might
Well,
be? What would be the reason of not being allowed to use footage of yourself doing a job? I mean, I can use footage of it on our show for jokes.
Yep.
Why can't you use it for persuasion?
The argument, the reason we're given is that the Capitol building and the cameras on us are government resources, and we can't use taxpayer resources to get reelected. But even
Wait. You can't use taxpayer resources to get elected. And yet incumbency in and of itself is probably the largest advantage that you could possibly
correct.
have.
So I think the argument that they would make is that
Yes.
if they let us use this footage, it would give us an even bigger incumbency advantage, which I understand. I
Nah.
actually, I beat an incumbent, so I get it. I actually think we have too many people sitting around Washington who have been there too long in both parties.
Right.
So I want to see challengers win, not my challenger, but other people's challengers sometimes. But I do think there is a kind of problem here, which is that, anybody can shoot a commercial that shows them looking like, I'll do the pose they make you do. Like this hero shot,
look at
right?
that.
But that hero shot doesn't put money in your pocket. It doesn't make for a fair economy. It doesn't get you health care when you need it. That's the work that we do and so I think part of it is, passing bills. You can talk about that. But I think it comes from this idea that the footage, that the speaking to the American public isn't part of our work. Our work is just legislation. And I'm here to tell you it's both. Because when you talk to Americans straight about what's at stake, you build support for the legislation that we're trying to pass.
Well, that brings up the next point, which is, you went on the floor and you did, I thought, a really effective presentation about the complexity of inflation and the fact that there were profits driving not all of inflation. There's certainly supply chain issues. There's certainly other things that are going on, the pandemic. But you showed that corporate profit taking was up drastically and that was a significant driver of inflation. The news covers inflation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not without reason. But what I was shocked about is that piece of information that you laid out so effectively made it, I think, to two shows. I think Mehdi Hasan showed it, and I think Lawrence O'Donnell showed it, and I think there was an article in Salon. And other than that, it's just the fear-mongering over inflation and none of the let's look at its component parts. And is that frustrating to you? And why does that happen?
Well, it's super frustrating that we're not trying to break down the actual problem to show voters that we understand it. You can't solve a problem very well that you don't understand. So I think part one we have to do is we have to show voters, one, we accept inflation as a problem. Two, here's where it's coming from. We have access to experts. That was a hearing where I had an expert who had done a research study on inflation. And so my job there was to take his academic study. I used to be an academic, and I know that most academics can't talk to regular people. So I was there to help translate things like non-unit input cost into real English for people. And then
My favorite kind of cost is the non-unit
yeah, exactly,
input
and
cost.
show them what he was really talking about. And what his study found is that he compared this inflationary period to past periods of inflation, which is important. We can't use the same tools of the past if this inflation's different than the past inflation, right? And so he compared, and he said this inflationary period, over half of the increase in what you're paying for stuff is coming from corporate profits. And in the past, that was about 10% of what was going on in inflation. And so the solutions to this inflation are going to have to include some new and different tools than we've used to fight past inflation. The other thing
It's complex.
It's complex. Inflation is always complex. Anyone who says, and this is the Republicans all day long, inflation's bad. No shit, Sherlock. Of course inflation's bad. I too go to the grocery store. So that is not a policy statement, by the way.
Congresswoman, put that in your commercial. That you're allowed to use this footage. This was not paid for by taxpayers. I want to see you right now, Congresswoman Katie Porter. No shit, Sherlock. Let's get this done.
I mean, that's all Republicans have to say, which is inflation is bad. Well, yes, folks, we get that. I just bought Fritos for $4.99. I spent $10 to feed these children Fritos, for crying out loud. So I get it, but the point is, what are you going to do about it? And you can't figure out what you're going to do about it unless you understand it. And I think part of the reason that Republicans and others don't want to look at what's really driving this inflation is they don't want to stand up to big corporations. And here's the part of that study that didn't get as much attention, but is really important.
Right.
It companies, the areas, the industries where there's the biggest profit margin, the biggest price gouging being tacked on to what we're paying.
You're talking about probably energy and the
our
like.
Industries,
automotive industry,
where there's almost no competition. So the more consolidated an industry is, the less competition, the more they're tacking on that profit margin and gouging us. So we have a competition problem in our economy. So that means that we need to break up monopolies. We need to incentivize and pathways for smaller businesses and mid-sized businesses to compete. I mean, we have a bread monopoly in this country, for crying out loud. We have a cereal monopoly. It's not just gas. It's actually hard to think of an industry where we don't have a monopoly when you really start digging into the data.
And the crazy thing is, everybody likes to talk about this idea that we have a free market economy, but we clearly don't. We have an interventionist economy, and the government picks winners and losers all the time. And meanwhile, the Fed turns a money hose on corporate, problems. But as soon as you give stimulus checks to people, everybody starts running around and talking about, oh, this can't happen. Larry Summers, God bless this guy. He's talking about we need 10% unemployment to really get this under control. And along the lines of your no shit Sherlock, I would say this, in the
I'm so glad you said that, so I didn't have to.
For God's sakes, the idea that the only way to get inflation under control is to make working people suffer to 10%. And I want to ask you, their only reference point is the 70s. We had stagflation. There were issues. The Fed apparently raised interest rates. They didn't raise it fast enough. Paul Volcker came in and saved the day by plunging us into a recession. How in God's name can a complex problem such as inflation only be solved by this one dial we have on the stereo called interest rates? And how is it that you don't go sector to sector?
So I think part of this is that Congress has, and even the White House, I would say, although this White House better than some others, and I want to talk about that, but has this tendency, politicians have this tendency to say, oh, the economy, that's someone else's problem. That's just the free, the invisible hand of the market. I can't do anything about that. Or they say, oh, that's the Fed, not us. Well, here's the thing. I can think of very little that I am in charge of, other than people's core constitutional rights, which, by the way, are also under attack, that is more important to what voters ask me to do than to deliver a strong, stable, globally competitive economy. I have never met the voter who didn't want that. Now, I was a bankruptcy attorney before I ran for Congress, so I do just fine in a crappy economy, but everybody else has trouble. So the strong, stable, globally competitive economy is a core mission of our Congress. We need to take that under advisement. We need to do something about that. And so I think what a lot of people say is, well, that's the Fed. Well, if you say inflation is only the responsibility of the Fed, then the only tool the Fed really has is the interest rate dial. The other tools, like stimulating competition, cracking down on price gouging, building a better supply chain, those tools are with Congress. And I want to say, President Biden and this Congress have deployed some of those tools. They're not fast. They're not as fast as the interest rate dial. Things like investing in infrastructure, you have to actually build it. You can't build it in 1 second. You can, rejuvenate our supply chains and start building chips here in the United States, and those things are underway. They're not as fast as the interest rate dial, so I think you have to use an approach of both. But this is not the 1970s. It's not. And our economy is really different then.
And interest rates are just a giant cudgel. And my question would be then, why isn't there more of a concerted effort between government and industry to publicly get together to address what is a national security issue, inflation and poverty and our currency is a national security issue. When that goes awry, we lose power and strength.
Industry doesn't want to solve this problem.
They don't want to solve inflation. They would rather see a recession.
Big corporations want to reap every bit of profit, and that's who's benefiting. Big corporations. Small businesses are having to hold the line and try to absorb this extra cost. It's
because all their costs are going up. They don't have a cushion.
The bigger the market power, the more they're riding this trend. And we've seen this. Don't believe me. Listen to earnings calls in your spare time. Listen to CEOs on earnings calls. They have said things like, a little bit of inflation is good for us. We think inflation means we can continue to find our price point at a higher and higher place. What does this mean for the rest of us who are paying? It means we're stretching our dollars farther and farther and farther. So industry isn't going. They don't want a recession. But they want to take every dollar of profit right up to the tipping point. And by the way, if we do push into a recession, they will be the first ones in line to Congress with their hands out for help. The very first ones.
But that's my point.
Absolutely true. I said this months ago when inflation first started showing up in the news, corporations want profit. I said it to somebody, this has nothing to do with COVID or the supply, very little to do with COVID or the supply chain. It's corporation greed that is driving inflation this time. Because by all rights, prices should have been low or stable throughout. And now because COVID's receding and people can spend money, they want to take the money.
And they use the excuse of rising oil prices.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it does have an effect on the price, but
Not this big.
What she was saying was, they're going to try to push it as far as they can. And if they don't have competition, like when you go to the store, you have all these kinds of cereal if you want to buy. She mentioned cereal. You can go in the supermarket or wherever, see all these cereals. But if you get back to it, they're,
Really only two companies that control the cereal market at this point in time. So that's not real, and they're pretty much in collusion with each other.
And it happens and that's what she's saying. So we have to step up strong and regulate and make this an economy that is a free market economy.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is if we try to produce more food locally and put our own products out there, have food co-ops and whatever, we can do what we can to try to do this. But if at the federal level, if they started to enforce the laws that are on the books, that they could reduce inflation if they took that on as an issue, rather than just an issue that you run on, but an issue that you try to solve, a problem that you try to solve.
And we already know that the Republicans have no plan for solving it, because what are they going to do when they take the House? Investigate. So they're going to distract you with investigations and hope you don't notice that they aren't passing any real legislation, or they're and so forth, or they're going to try and hold Biden hostage with debt ceiling money, or they're not going to fund the government. And my educated guess is Biden's going to say, you control the purse, this is my agenda. You don't come meet me halfway, go ahead, shut down the government.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen, because that would, hopefully in this lame duck session, they'll find a way to
Well,
raise
I
the
think
debt
in the
limit.
lame duck session, they're planning to fund the government one more year.
Right. It's against the law, for them not to pay
fund
their
your real
debts.
estate.
Not
Right.
to pay their debts. What they're saying is they vote to pay money out,
Right.
but when it comes, when you have to borrow to meet those payments, they're saying, well, no, we'll just default. And that'll hurt everybody across the world.
Across the board. That will hurt corporations. So that's the one thing I honestly think, if they try, their corporate donors are going to yell at them.
Well,
and say don't
if
do
we
it.
just have a couple minutes, I have a longer video, but I just want to show you a little bit from the Ralph Nader Radio Hour, because we're in that period of time when Social Security, you can change your insurance plans or
Correct.
whatever. So I just wanted to give you a few minutes of what Ralph Nader has to say about that on the Ralph Nader Radio Hour.
Back to the Ralph Nader Radio Hour. I'm Steve Scrovan, along with David Feldman and Ralph. Ralph, you wanted to talk further about one of our favorite topics, Medicare Advantage, which we call Medicare Disadvantage. What's new on that front?
A massive deceptive advertising campaign during the enrollment period for Medicare going out to elderly people. It's so aggressive, they're sending these cards and these letters to people who passed away years ago. And they, meaning companies like Aetna, Cigna, United Healthcare, and nobody is rebutting it. At the Federal Trade Commission, they're not rebutting it out of Congress. They're not holding congressional hearings. AARP is connected with some of these Medicare disadvantaged companies and is getting economic compensation using their trademarks and commissions business with United Healthcare. So here's an example. In the mail came a double postcard, and it said, postage paid, business reply, to something called the National Response Center from Salt Lake City. So you open it up, it says, attention Medicare beneficiary, it's time to review your Medicare benefits for 2023. Medicare benefit carriers have finalized the benefit enhancements for your 2023 enrollment period, which, by the way, ends in December 5th. Please tell us what benefits are most important to you for January 2023. And then they poll you. And it just so happens that they polled you only the question that Medicare Advantage touts, that is, dental care, hearing exam, vision exam, and you're supposed to check it off. And then what you will do is, if you send them the poll, then they'll really do the hard sell on you. They've already induced 48% of all Medicare elderly beneficiaries to go into the Medicare Advantage, or what I call the Medicare Disadvantage. The traditional Medicare beneficiaries are subsidizing these health insurance companies who are running Medicare Advantage or Medicare Disadvantage. Now, what they're not telling you in this poll, they don't say, do you favor being put in a narrow network? You lose your choice, free choice of doctor and hospital under Medicare Disadvantage. They don't ask you whether you favor prior authorization of your doctors who want to treat you in a certain way, and they got to wait for days sometimes for prior authorization by the insurance company to okay it. They don't tell you that there's a much higher rate of denial of claims than in traditional Medicare, and many other dark sides to Medicare Disadvantage. So listeners, spread the word. If you're going to choose traditional Medicare.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank
Ralph.
you,
I'm sorry
Ralph, on that one. Perhaps we'll have time to show more of it on a different show.
Yeah, but just beware. Stay with Medicare, the traditional Medicare.
Medicare, yep. I know Tony gets those cards all the time. He gets the phone calls, and I keep telling him, stay with what you've got. You're not going to get any better in the market, so stay where you are. And hopefully he will. And we want to thank you for turning in the show. And remember, the power is with the people.
Yes, and have a happy holiday season.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. The strikes of the bosses we must fight for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches.